Good morning, everyone. This is Mark Edery from the Delaware Department of Education. On behalf of our department, we're extremely happy to be with you here, although virtually today, for our CGA Roadshow training. We have a good amount of time carved out. We have all of that time if we need it, and then some. Our goal is to make sure that you leave today with all of your questions answered and with a good understanding of the CGA process for the new grant cycle. So welcome, LEA representatives. Again, happy to have you here. It is 9 o'clock, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. And everybody can see the screen, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. If at any point you're not seeing the screen properly, or if your audio cuts out or anything like that, please just enter it into the chat box, and that way we know and we can troubleshoot as we go. However, we're certainly not anticipating any problems. So welcome. A little bit about us at the department and the philosophy that we take in wanting to serve the LEAs. We're constantly asking, how can we help you? And we have a customer service orientation that we're dedicated to. We want the grant process to be something that is smooth and stress-free for you. And, we're here to make that happen. Whatever it is you need at any time, please reach out to myself or any of the other program managers, and we'll be happy to provide technical assistance, advice, whatever is needed. Our goal is for everyone to get to 100% at the end of this process, and it's just a matter of supporting one another in getting there. So please always feel free to reach out. And so just a couple housekeeping items before we go ahead and get started. We're going to kindly ask that you check a couple of settings. The first is that you're going to want to turn your microphone, turn your sound to off. The reason for that is we've got just about 60 people, or actually, excuse me, we have 95 people right now on the webinar, which is fantastic. And sometimes background noise, when you multiply that by 95, can make it so that we're not hearing whoever the presenter is. So we are going to ask that you please turn your microphones off, and that your cameras are also off. We're not going to be doing we're not going to be doing webcam images of each other. We'll be using my screen as the basis of the visuals for the presentation. So if you could take a moment and turn mics off and cameras off, that would be fantastic. And so with a group this large, and again, with our goal being to walk out of here, at some point, with all of the questions answered and comments made and being able to share good ideas, the format we're going to use is the chat box. And so if you have questions, if you have concerns, issues, ideas, that kind of thing, if you look at my screen, or actually on your own screens, you will see a chat box. Just feel free to enter in whatever questions, issues that you have. And what we're going to do in terms of format is we're going to pause at the end of each section when each presenter is finished with his or her part. We'll take chat box questions there. Phil Kiefer is going to help to facilitate that. And then at the very end of the presentation, we're also going to go through any of the chat box questions that came up that were not answered for whatever reason. And again, we have plenty of time for that, but that is the format that we're going to use today, as opposed to asking questions in a live format. With a group this large, it would be difficult to do that and to do that well. So that's a little bit about our format for the day. As far as this presentation goes, the presentation will be posted in the following locations. I will throw a link up on the eGrants homepage. Also within eGrants under resources, there will be a file. We will put something in Schoology, and also it will be posted on the DDOE website. So it's one of the great things about GoToMeeting is, we can record these webinars. So we are recording now, and this will, again, be posted in these different locations. That will happen at some point later today or very early tomorrow, so that if you want to share it with someone who was not able to make it, or if you'd like to go back and use the presentation as a resource to review or to answer questions, you can look at any of these places. So a little bit about our agenda. We start out with our welcome agenda and introductions. I will then go through timeline highlights and changes. After that, and I'm not going to go through the presenters now because they're all going to say hello before we actually start. But following timeline highlights and changes, we'll be learning about Perkins CTE, followed by Title I Part A, followed by Title II Part A, followed by Title III EL and Immigrant, followed by Title IV Part A. We then transition into IDEA 611, IDEA 619, and then toward the tail end, we'll talk a little bit about application development, closing remarks. We will be asking you to complete a survey. It does not have to be completed, immediately, but if you could take some time over the next couple of days, that would be fantastic to let us know how we did. And then the last segment, which we have from noon to 12:30, would be individual assistance, getting to whatever questions are being entered in the chat box that have not been answered. And again, these times are just a rough guide. We may take longer. We may not need as much time, but we're here to, again, present all the information and to make sure that you leave with all of your questions having been answered. And so that said, we're going to ask each of our presenters to say hello, and we'll start with Phil.
Good morning, everybody.
Okay, and I'm Mark, the eGrants CGA monitoring tool I'll be talking about.
And good morning, I'm Bart Gill, and I'm going to be talking about the CTE and Perkins portion of the Consolidated grant.
Title I is next. Tanisha and John, are you there?
Good morning, this is John Holtz. I'm here from Rehoboth Beach and happy to be with this lovely group of people. So I'm looking forward to talking to you in a few minutes.
Good morning, this is Tanisha Cook. I'll also be presenting on Title I Part A with John.
Good morning, this is Rashawn Austin. I will be presenting Title II Part A.
Good morning, this is Maria Paxton, and I'll be presenting Title III English Learners and the Title III Immigrant portion of the presentation.
Good morning, everyone. This is Eric Stansell. I hope all is well. I'm going to be presenting Title IV Part A.
Good morning, this is Marianne Michkowski. I will be presenting the overall picture of IDEA.
Hi, this is Susan Venema from the Exceptional Children's Work Group. I'll be presenting on significant disproportionality within IDEA 611.
And batting cleanup, good morning, everybody. This is Cindy Brown. I'll be talking about early childhood special education under the IDEA.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, fellow co-presenters. What we did on the next couple of slides is we posted the DDOE Program Manager Contact List. So it's got each of our names along with the LEAs we're associated with, if applicable, and some contact information. So we're certainly not going to read through that, but we wanted to make this resource, this PowerPoint, and the recorded webinar, the best, most comprehensive resource that we possibly could. And so you can feel free to refer back to this if you want to get in touch with any of us, and we're always very happy to hear from you. So we're going to jump right into the first section now that we're pretty much done with housekeeping, and I will, it's my pleasure to be presenting a little bit about the CGA timeline, highlights, and changes. And so a little bit about the grant cycle. And, this was sent out already. There were some changes made to it as far as timeline. But back in December, we sent out a stakeholder survey. What you folks think about the process and how we can improve is extremely important to all of us. So we had that out there for about a month. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of those results later. So in April, which is today, the 30th, our amended date for the CGA training, the grant application is actually open. Now, what you will find is that there are prior year allocations in there currently. I will send out another communication in a couple of weeks to let you know when the actual allocations are there. But the prior allocations will allow you to begin to budget and have some idea of where you might want to be. So again, today is the CGA Roadshow training session. The final, again, I'll send this out as a reminder, but the final allocations we anticipate will be loaded on the 9th. And then on the 10th is the first submission date. Now, I highlighted this really because it's important to note that this is not a whole lot of time, and given everything that's happened with the school schedules and working remotely and just all the change, like, we totally understand that. And so we set this first date of July 10th specifically for the purpose of recoding. So you can literally just submit the application without having done anything. We will get it right back to you so that you would be able to recode back to July 10th. So we're calling this a voluntary / early grant submission date. You do not have to submit on that date. And again, the only reason why we have it there is for purposes of recoding. What the first hard submission date is August 7th, and we're asking that all LEAs submit then. From the 10th to the 21st will be a review period for us. Again, a reminder, you won't be able to make, you'll be able to view, but you won't be able to make edits while the program managers are taking a look at the work that you've done. We'll get that back to you by the 24th. And then change as opposed to last year, we are going to have a final grant submission date of September 4th. And we're asking all LEAs to make a submission by this date. And we will give additional feedback for those applications that need a little bit more tweaking.
I'll go in there and listen, but just come in and let me know who.
I will, yeah. And then I can print out. Hey, Craig, can you help me print out these labels? I'm not sure how to put them in the top here.
Oh, cool.
There's labels and I have.
Just a reminder, caller 9, I'm not sure who that is, but caller 9, if you could please just mute your microphone, that would be fantastic. Thank you very much. So where I left off was the September 4th will be the final grant submission date. We'll give you feedback if there's any tweaks that need to be made, and then our target date to get final feedback to all of you will be before the new year. So if you have any questions or concerns, ideas, whatever about the timeline, please reach out to me, shoot me an email, and we'll be happy to discuss. Here's just a little bit more information about the timeline, but that's nothing new. We don't have to actually read through that. And so that's timeline. We're going to jump now to eGrants highlights and changes. And we're going to do some toggling back and forth between the presentation, which I have here, and eGrants, which I have here. So salaries and OEC calculation, why this is a great tool. One of the things that I had the pleasure of providing a lot of technical assistance with this year was the calculation of salaries and OECs. And if you go into the budget and you're looking in salaries, you can enter in salary amounts manually, and you can enter in OECs manually. And there were some LEAs that were actually doing that. And I just want to reiterate that there's a tool within eGrants that will do the salaries and you enter in the salaries, but it'll calculate the OECs for you, and then it imports that information directly into your budget. And so this is a fantastic tool. because it eliminates the potential for human error, and it's just one less thing that you need to do because it ends up being an auto import. And we've actually added a new function to this, which is the % full-time equivalent. And so, again, I'm going to toggle back and forth a little bit between the presentation and eGrants. And I am in Caesar Rodney, which was this LEA. Their representatives, their CGA people were kind enough to allow me to use their application as a demo. And we promise that at the end we'll go ahead and erase anything that we put in. But if you were doing this, you would be in your own application and you would just be in the sections area, which is pretty much where all the magic happens. And you would start by going to the salaries and OEC calculation. And so a couple of things to note here. You can select the category, right? And so let's say that this was for a new staff member. And you can go ahead and select what school. So this would be Allen Freer Elementary School. In the description, it's got to move my GoToMeeting box 1 second. In the description, we're just going to put test. But in another portion of the presentation, we're going to actually go over the specs that should be in this box. But what is new is this drop down here, full-time, part-time. And so you can select full-time if it's a full-time employee. And then you can not only select part-time, but you can go ahead and select the percentage part-time. So this is an upgrade from last year. But for intents and purposes, for this demonstration, I'm just going to put that this person is full-time. So we've done the category, we've done the location. We're just putting test in for now for the description, and we've selected full-time, which is the new feature. Now, here's what's pretty neat. Let's say that the salary for this person is $53,000. So I'm just going to go ahead and enter in $53,000 here, right? You can see that it's done some auto calculation, but there's one other step. The only thing that needs to be entered in manually is the healthcare cost. So let's say that's $7,500. Again, we're just pulling these numbers out of the sky. So with a salary amount for this person for $53,000 in health insurance, the program is automatically calculated FICA, Medicare, pension, workers' comp, unemployment, and then you end up getting a total cost. And so once this is saved, this will enter into your budget, and this will be populated with information including some of these costs and full-time, part-time. And in order to do that, let's say that this was going to be paid out of Title 1A. So I would just click Add Grant. If 100% of the salary was paid out of this grant, then I would put 100. If 60% was paid out of this grant and 40 was paid out of, I don't know, Title III, then I would put a 60 here and I would make another entry for 40% out of Title III. But for intents and purposes here, I'm just going to go ahead and put 100%. I'm going to save and go to. And then the work that we did here, we will see populated within the budget. So this is salaries and OEC calculation. Now, in order to cross-check, let's just go to Title I, Part A. Let's go to Budget District and see if it's there. So I'll point this out as well. We're working with the vendor on this. If you're in the salaries and OEC calculator and you want to navigate somewhere else, it's going to ask you to select the appropriate full-time, part-time value before saving. I spoke to them as recently as yesterday afternoon. This is like a mini bug that they're working on, so you shouldn't have to do this all the time. But for now, the workaround is just to select anything for full-time, part-time. You can see that the work that we did in saving the position is already done, right? This has all been cleared out. We saved it already. So this just kind of creates a ghost record. It's the only workaround temporarily. So I'm going to just do that to get out of here. Okay, it may not show up in
Mark, I think you chose Freire as a school, so you have to go to the school budget, not the district budget.
We were just in Caesar Rodney, but I'll go to the school budget, yeah. Oh, sorry, Freer. I thought you meant Freer Charter School. Pardon me, Phil. Okay, so we can see here now that salaries $60,000, OECs for 24,356, and this is an auto import, and that's the work that we just did. All right. So that takes us through our demonstration of salaries and OECs. My strong recommendation is to not just go to the budget and enter it in manually. It is a great tool, makes life easier, and we've got the new function as well.
Mark, I believe you have a video training on that also, don't you?
Yes. If you go to the eGrants website, there is a video training on how to do that. And there is also under resources, you'll see the same video link. Because when we found out that this was something that a lot of districts had questions with back in the fall, we created the training video. And on that, if there ever is a topic that you think would benefit the greater good, anything, how to do X, Y, or Z, let me know and I will create a training video and post it. And I've done a bunch of them so far. Whenever I do one, I kick that out as an email to the eGrants contacts, just another tool for us to have. So thank you, Phil, for mentioning the video. All right, so the next piece is the equitable share calculation, and this is something that affects titles 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so again, appreciate your indulgence in kind of toggling back and forth a little bit, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to do search funding apps. We're going to continue with Caesar Rodney. They were kind enough to move us forward in draft started. And so you will note that in each program area, we'll just work in Title I just because there's going to be something called equitable share calculation, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on equitable share calculation. And so we've made some changes here, some changes that we think are good ones that make the process more user-friendly, and that also give us a nice place to store some data. We've also been able to condense by eliminating a page from the application and combining. And so where we start off with in the first box is non-participating private schools. And so when you as the LEA send out an intent to participate form, you're going to find out that there's some schools that are not going to want to participate. They may return the form, say no thank you, or they may not respond at all. And so, the LEAs need to be keeping records of it. We need to be keeping records of it. And now this is a place to warehouse all that. So for Caesar Rodney, again, this is dummy information, but here's a drop down of all the private schools. And so I just put Bear Christian High School and their status. I put non-participating. So Caesar Rodney would actually do this if they sent out an intent to participate form to this school. and the school returned the form and said, no, thank you, we're not going to participate. So this is a place to house that record. We put in the second example of AstraZeneca Child Development Center because this, let's just say that the intent to participate form was sent out and the LEA never received anything back. So this is a place where we can pick non-responsive. And so in this box is a great place to house this information of those who have returned and said no thank you, and those who may not have responded at all. So that's box number one. Box number two is participating private schools. So these are the schools that are going to be participating in equitable share. And so for as many schools as there are, you would just continue to add. I just added Holy Cross Academy for Creative Enrichment and AdvoSer, but if I wanted to add more, I would just click on Add Row and go ahead and add more. And then what you would do on the LEA end is for each of these schools, you would enter in the number of students who were eligible for equitable share. All right. And so just for purposes of demonstration, I put in 7, 100, and 150 for a magical theoretical total of 957. And so A1 is a key cell for us, right? Because what A1 does, 418, that is an auto import. The data is entered elsewhere, all right? But it's an auto import into this box. You see, you can't, I'm actually clicking on the box now, but I can't actually change anything. This is the number of students who are eligible for Title I services from the district. So what we end up with then is a total of the number of students in the district plus the number of students who geographically live in the district but attend a private school, right, 257, and then we end up with 675. And so when all is said and done, another new feature of this, if you were to look at the old version of this page, there was not a per pupil allocation when all is said and done, but now there is. So for each of the children that are served by this district, either in the private school setting or in a public school setting who are eligible for funds, the per pupil allocation would be $3,574 and 97 cents per student. Again, these numbers are just, totally demo numbers. However, we put them in there just so we got an idea of how the calculation takes place and what resources are available on this page. And so that is a little bit about equitable share calculation. There used to be
Mark?
Yes, Phil, go ahead.
Before you go on,
Yep.
just look in the participating private schools section.
Yes.
All the way to the right, there's a new column there that says allocation.
I'm hovering
So
on it now.
Yeah. So what's happened is that this page is now calculating the overall district equitable share set aside and dividing it into the schools that are participating. Many districts used to have a separate spreadsheet that they would send us, letting us know how they divided up the money. And so now we don't have to collect that anymore. This page does that for us.
Yep, and what Phil's referring to, I'm hovering over right now, and this is the column he was referring to called allocation. Yeah, thank you, Phil. And then what I just wanted to end off with was, again, there used to be a separate page on the e-grants, on the actually part of the CGA for private schools. So if you're looking for that page, you won't find it anymore because it's been merged in this page. And so that was equitable share calculation. I threw a screenshot in here of the old. You can always go back to 2020 in the grant if you wanted to look at it. We talked about how the new has the PPA as an auto calculation. Separate private schools page has been eliminated. And we did our live demonstration for equitable share calculation. And so budget detail requirement form. So we're certainly not going to go through all of this, okay? But this is a resource that will help guide you when you're adding budget details. And when we were looking at the OEC calculator, I had mentioned that, I just entered test into that box. But when you actually go into the budget and you look at the box within the budget, there are some things that you want to keep in mind. Some are required for all programs. Some are program specific. So again, we're not going to go through everything here. This is a lot, but do take a look at it. We will take a look, though, I think, at what's for all, and then for items that you enter in, budget items that you enter in, if you're doing, say, Perkins or IDEA or Title II, you're going to want to still be looking at those. So an example, we'll do salaries because that's a very common entry. And so FTE new for 2021, we talked about this. I showed this. That was the drop-down menu on the right-hand side. Full part-time status with a percentage will be auto-filled as long as the salary OEC calculator has been used. And example, full-time 100% would be auto-populated in the narrative description box as long as that information was previously entered into the salary OEC calculator via its new drop-down function. Okay, and then so you would want the status of FTE for all of these, no matter what program you're working with salaries. You would want the title of the position. You would want the percentage funded. And so an example would be 1 FTE science teacher, 0.5 Title I would be an example of how to go ahead and do salaries. And so that would be something for all programs. And then, again, we're not going to go ahead and read all of them because there aren't changes in the other ones as compared to years past. But do take a look at your OECs, contractual services, travel, supplies and materials, capital outlay, indirect costs, and audit fees. And what this does, it just taking a little bit of time on the front end to make sure that the information entered into the narrative box is complete will save everyone time later on the back end, not having to go back and do multiple revisions and things like that. And so that's our review of the budget detail requirement form. All of these links are good as well, and following the presentation, if you want to access any of these forms, you can access them by clicking on the links. Everything will also be available in resources in eGrants as well. And so the next are time and effort requirements review and updated forms. We will look at those next. And so the main message here is this is the latest and greatest on time and effort. And so you can use this as a resource when you have questions about, what you might need to do on your end and what the people who are being paid may need to do on their ends. A couple things to keep in mind to sum it up, though. Semi-annual certifications are completed for each employee who works solely on a single federal funding source. So, for example, if you have an employee who's being paid 100% out of Title I, semi-annual certifications are fine. That's what we would need to do, and there's information in more detail on that in the training document. Now, employees working on 2 or more cost objectives, in other words, are being paid out of more than one grant, perhaps 60% Title I and 40% Title III or whatever, they have to complete a personal activity report or PAR or equivalent documentation. So they would need to do monthly time and effort certifications. That is kind of the Reader's Digest version of the document, but you can feel free to look at the document as well for more information, for more detailed information. And of course, if you ever have questions, you can feel free to go ahead and reach out to us. Next is transferability, guidance, and procedure. And there's a training document on that. And so again, this is a resource that talks about what transferability is, why we do it, a little bit about how to do it. So, it's wordy. We're certainly not going to sit and read all of it, but, just know that it is a resource that is here. And this is one where it would do us well to actually engage in a live demonstration of. Okay, and so we're going to go ahead and start in sections, which I always joke around, say this is where all the magic happens. And we're going to go into allocations. This is where we start with transferring. Now, transferability, basically, right, we're dealing with transferring funds from one title program to another. And you have the ability to do that. That needs to be documented, because without going through the process that we're going to go through, there's no record of where the funds that were transferred actually went to, right? And so this will enable us to keep a record of that. So we can see that the allocation for Title I for Caesar Rodney is 24,13106, right? And we can see that the allocation for Title II, Title IIA, is 513,874. And so let's say, just for the sake of demonstration purposes, that we want to transfer $500,000 from Title IIA into Title 1A. That's what we're going to go ahead and do. And so we do that simply by going into this box, and I'm going to type in the amount that I want to transfer. So in this case, it's $500,000. We know we can do that because there's more than $500,000 here, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and click. And we can see that this negative amount, right, is going to come out of the column here, and we can see that $500,000, if you just look at the grid, right, this is Title I, and it's coming from Title IIA. So I'm going to make sure that I save it. And I'm going to scroll down to see if the arithmetic makes logical sense, which it should, right? So for Title I, they started out with an allocation of 24,131,106. We just transferred $500,000 into Title I for a new total of 2,913,106, right? So the arithmetic works there, and we should try it the other way, just as a cross-check to make sure that we did everything right so far. The allocation for Title IIA was 513,874. We transferred $500,000 out of Title II, so what's left in Title II is 13874. So all of that should be on the up and up, should be correct, should be accurate. Looks good so far. So going into allocations is your first step in the transfer process, in the transferability process. Now, the next step, we want to, excuse me, I'm going to grab a sip of water. I'm talking too much. Okay, wonderful, thank you. So the next step is to go into the title program where the funds were transferred into, right? So again, to go into the title program where the funds were transferred into. In this case, we took funds out of Title II and put them in, sorry about that, and put them in, give me one second, please. Okay, so we took funds out of Title II, we put it in Title I, and so we're going to click into funds transferred to Title I. If we took funds out of Title II and put them somewhere else, then we would go to whatever title program it is that we put those funds in. But again, we put them in Title I, so we're going to go to funds transferred to Title I. So I cheated a little bit and went in here before, but I will show you. Because this next step is an important step. when you go to funds transferred to Title I, right? Let's kind of unpack this so you know what it is you're looking at. You're going to see blank fields here, okay? Now, these fields are going to come from entries that you've already made in the budget. And we're not going to go through how to make entries in the Title I budget because you already know how to do that, right? So I went in and I made an entry in the budget for travel. I made one under contractual. I made one under supplies, right? Under admin and under K through 12 instruction. So when you go into this page, the system knows where you have already put information into the budget, into these account codes. And that's where your blank areas are going to come from, right? And so if we look at this top box, what does it tell us? Well, it tells us that there's a $500,000 transfer amount from Title II, right? Here's the $500,000. And it's also telling us, okay, out of that $500,000, we know that you've got these areas. There's budget items for these areas under these account codes. What do you want to do with it? So I want to put $100,000 in travel out of my 500. And you could see immediately the remaining amount has been adjusted to 400, right? Because we started with 5. I just put 1 into travel. We now have $400,000. And I'm going to go ahead and enter in $100,000 for each of these 5. You can see I've done 4 out of 5 so far with 100 left. All that arithmetic works. And I've done 5 out of 5, right? And I'm now zeroed out. This is where you want to get to. You want to make sure that you're zeroed out. And if you follow those steps and go ahead and save, then you are in a good place as far as transferability goes. Right? So what did we talk about? We talked about going into allocations. We talked about budget entries. And then we talked about going into funds transferred to. In this case, again, it was Title I or whatever program you transferred into. Okay? Moving along. Some of the things that came up in the survey that we sent out, not some of them, all of them were reviewed by program managers, actually one at a time. And anything that were quick fixes, we went ahead and did. We took suggestions for changes to, how we manage the program, different aspects of e-grants, things here and there. So one of those was working in more than one window at a time. And so this is something that's come up again and again. And I spoke to the vendor on this as early as yesterday afternoon. One more time, is there anything additional that you can give to us? And so this is a section in eGrants that just is not, it's not something that's smooth. It's possible to do if you're using certain browsers and you do certain settings, but it's going to vary from individual computer to individual computer. And the vendor basically said, listen, it's not a good idea. So I said, okay, but what workaround is there so that we can make sure that people are not, doing an inordinate amount of toggling? And what he suggested, and I will show you this, is what people generally are looking to do is to have the set of questions in front of them and then be able to go through the application. One way to do that would be, I'm in sections here, right? You could go to print and then select items. So I'm going to just click select items. And now I can go through the entire application and I can select whatever I want, any of these sections to print. So I can actually print it out, have it with me as a hard copy, and then have eGrants up electronically. Or the other thing you can do, and what I would probably do if I was in that position, is rather than printing a hard copy, you can go ahead and when you go to your print preferences, you can make a PDF. And then you can have the PDF I'll throw up, I have a bunch of stuff up here right now, right? But let's just say this was a PDF of the questions. You can toggle back and forth from this PDF in eGrants. And so that's probably the best, neatest, cleanest workaround we have right now for working in more than one window at one time. So there's not a clean way to do it to actually be working, but at least if you do the print from sections page or make a PDF from the sections page, you'll be able to toggle back and forth like I just showed you from a PDF to eGrants. So that was one thing that came up. Another thing that came up was the consolidated checklist. And I don't know about you, but large majority of people who I've spoken to, the first thing you do when you get into the consolidated checklist is collapse it. So it's just like one extra thing you have to do every single time you want to go in and look. So what you'll find in the new grant for 21 is that the consolidated checklist collapses itself. As soon as you go in, you will have a collapse view. Now, if you don't like that, you can go ahead and look at the broader view as well. You can change it, but the default setting will be collapsed. There was some feedback that we received in terms of save button features, and the best that we can do is if you come across something where you're trying to save and it's not saving, just reach out to me. We can walk through it together. You can tell me exactly what you're doing. I can try to recreate it on this end, and we'll work with the vendor. We weren't able to identify any global issues with the save button features, so we want to kind of address that on a case-by-case basis. So if you have feedback on the save button features in the new grant or anything else really that you think is looking a little glitchy, not working properly, just let me know. We'll work on it together, and then if need be, we'll reach out to the vendor for assistance as well. And LEA feedback is always respected and valued. It means a great deal to us, and it really helps us to do a better job. For the sake of time today, I did throw in a link that has some of the results to the survey, but Phil and I had discussed this ahead of time. We'll go through these responses at a later time, but rest assured that we literally used all the information from the survey, created a monstrous spreadsheet, and went through every single response. And we used it as a basis for the upgrades and enhancements that you'll see in the 21 CGA, some of which we've already gone over. And again, it's my pleasure to be here today. You will hear more from me as I will be facilitating the remainder of the presentation, but you'll be hearing from my wonderful colleagues for each of their grant areas of expertise. And again, this is my contact information. Please do feel free to reach out to me at any time. I will always help. I'll get back to you quickly and help in any way that I can. And so this is the conclusion of the first portion of our presentation. And we can certainly go to questions, comments, ideas that went into the chat box. And again, our format for this is going to be all program managers at any time. If you'd like to jump in on answering any of these at the end of any section, go ahead and please do so that we're providing our LEA colleagues with the most well-rounded, complete answers that we possibly can. So with that, Phil, I'll turn it to you, and can you share some questions with us, please?
Sure. So we had three questions that were entered into the chat box, two of which I can answer, one I can't. So the first one was, should we be sending out intent to participate forms now? And the answer is yes, even though I know we're in a situation where many schools, non-publics, are closed. Districts should still be making that attempt. You can also send emails, you can make phone calls. There's many other ways that you could possibly get this information. And, you do have time to collect it. So hopefully you can send them out. Hopefully they'll come back and you'll be able to mark it on the equitable share page, whether they have returned the form or not. The second question was, do each of the titles need to be complete for the non-participating schools section if they were non-responsive? And the answer to that is yes. Unfortunately, each of the equitable share pages, Title I, Title II, Title III, and Title IV, do not talk to each other. And the reason for that is because they collect different information. Title I asks for the number of low-income students, and Title III asks for the number of EL students. So we don't have, and schools can simply choose to participate in Title I and not in Title III, or they could choose to participate in Title III and not in Title I. So we can't have the information transfer from one equitable share page to another equitable share page because it could be different. So yes, if you have a non-responsive school, you've got to go, into each one of those pages and mark them as non-responsive. Again, if you transfer your funds out of, say, Title IV, you won't even see the Title IV section to go in and mark that as non-responsive in equitable share. The last question was about time and effort, and we have received no guidance whatsoever about time and effort logs, monthly time and effort reports. I don't have an answer for you at this time. What are we supposed to do? And this is not the first time I've gotten this question. I've asked and not received a response. So I can't answer that question right now. I don't foresee an issue with the 6-month semi-annual reports because we were in session for a portion of that time. But the monthly ones, I don't know. I know we're continuing to pay those people out of those federally funded categories, but do they turn in a time and effort report? And because you're certifying that they worked in that area, and they didn't. They were home. So I don't know what the answer is at this point. We'll continue to research that and let you know as soon as we do know an answer. Okay, that was it for the chat box. I'll continue to monitor the chat box, and at the end of each session, I will bring up any questions that people have asked. So, Mark, we can move on to the next person.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Phil. And just a reminder, I got a couple texts. If you could just take a moment before we move on to the next section to double check that your audio is shut off and that your camera is shut off, that would be fantastic. So moving along, next we are going to hear from Dr. Gill on Perkins CTE.
Well, good morning, everyone, and I hope everyone's doing well and thriving in this crazy environment that we're in right now. I'm going to talk about some of the updates on the Perkins CTE area for the Consolidated grant. So if you want to flip to the next slide there, Mark. So to start out, you'll see here that the Perkins 5 implementation calendar looks a little different than most of the other sections for the Consolidated grant. Due to the reauthorization of Perkins 5 on the federal level, there's been some significant changes that have taken place for the Perkins application this year, Perkins portion of the Consolidated grant. And because of that, we have been granted an extension for the Perkins piece. And with that extension, it means that we won't be actually approving the Perkins section of the grant until later in August, September. But this does not hold up the approval of the rest of the Consolidated grant this year. So you'll be able to submit everything else and get approval. And then the Perkins plan will be something that will get approved later in the fall. But it will not hold up the funding of the other parts of the application. So you can see here we did put together a implementation calendar for the development of your Perkins 5 plan. So if you want to flip to the next slide, Mark. So something that's new for the new Perkins 5 is a local needs assessment. And this is going to be a self-evaluation.
They're on their way.
This is going to be a self-evaluation for the secondary and post-secondary institutions, talking about the improving the student achievement equity across all CTE programs within their school. And it's an operational plan that is based on the current status of your programs, and we did develop and give you the resources in Schoology to look at all your data based on the Perkins core indicators, and for you to evaluate with your stakeholders to then develop the goals for your district. If we could flip to the next slide, Mark. So on the local needs assessment, as I stated, the framework for the local needs assessment is designed as one related to performance management tool, and it's broken down into 4 core priority areas of program quality, student readiness and equity, talent development, and systems alignment. And ultimately, the needs assessment provides the overarching quality improvement plan. So your LEA vision and goals and local performance routines, and everything will connect across these 4 priority areas. Could flip to the next slide, Mark. And then once the needs assessment is completed, you will then complete the local application like you've done in the past. And this part of the local application in the system looks very similar, but the content of the questions is a little bit different. And just like the needs assessment, it is broken down into the 4 core priority areas. And it's gonna be based on your needs assessment and the information that you put in your needs assessment. And so you'll need to have that present while you're working on the local application so that you can make sure that the 2 align as much as possible when it comes to pieces of the puzzle in the local application versus what's in the needs assessments. Next slide, Mark. And if you've been part of our CTE cadres, we've been sharing all of this information in there in a more detailed fashion as we've gone through every piece of the needs assessment, or going through every piece of the needs assessment, as well as the local application. All of the support material for completing the needs assessment and also the local application is located in Schoology. And so it's under the CTE Directors Cadre Group and Resources. To join the group, the access code is listed there on this slide. And if you haven't spoke with your CTE directors at your school, they are very aware of all of these changes, and they've been sitting in on the CTE cadres and hearing what needs to be done for this portion of the Perkins, or for this portion of the consolidated grant. And just know that we are here at the DOE CTE STEM group is here to help you through this process, as it is completely new, and there's added components to it that haven't had to be done in the past. And so we are more than prepared and ready to work with you on a one-to-one basis if we need to help you get the new needs assessment and new local application completed for this year's consolidated grant application. And as we develop more resources, they will be added to the site and shared through the weekly communication that we've been sending to our CTE directors for the consolidated grant, as well as Perkins information. So if you have any questions, you can definitely email me directly or respond to our weekly reports that we've been sending out, or updates we've been sending out. And we're more than willing to help you, or reach out to your LEA liaison within CTE, and they can find the answers for you as well. All right, thank you, Mark.
Thanks so much, Bart. So we'll now segue into any questions or comments from the chat box, please.
There were no CTE related questions in the chat box. We can move on.
Okay, thank you, Phil. We now move on to Title 1A, and my pleasure to introduce Tanisha Cook and John Hulse.
Good morning again, everyone. This is Tanisha. John and I are going to tag team these slides, so you're going to hear from both of us throughout this. But I'll start with how Title I funds can be used. And we'll start by taking a look at that document first. This document is housed on the DDOE website as well as the Schoology page. There has not been any updates to this information, but I do want to highlight specifically on page 2, where it starts to talk about spending in a school-wide program, school. So Title I requires school-wide schools to do 3 major things. One of those things is to perform a comprehensive needs assessment of the entire school that takes into account information on the academic achievement of children. So as we transition into the 2021 school year, and I understand with everything going on, it's still, the needs assessment is still required. And as part of that, because that needs assessment helps you build your school-wide plan. And so anytime that I have to reach out to US Ed regarding approvals for expenditures, the first thing I am asked is it in alignment with the school needs assessment, the comprehensive needs assessment, and is it identified in the school-wide plan? So for the districts with multiple schools, it's still going to be very important that when it comes to budgeting at the school-wide level, that these needs assessments are done and that they are taken into consideration when the school-wide plan is developed. Also, page 3 goes into number 3, spend funds consistent with the school's needs and school-wide plans. So again, all of the spending should be aligned with what's in the school-wide plan, which should also connect back to the comprehensive needs assessment. For those of you that were identified for the monitoring this year, if you remember, those were some uploads that were required for the monitoring this year. You were required to upload sample school-wide plans as well as the needs assessment to show the alignment. So again, very important to highlight. The rest of the information has not changed. Just wanted to highlight those things. So Mark, are we going to be able to view the allowable and unallowable expenditures?
Yes. Do you want me to put that one up next, Tanisha?
Yes, let's go to that one next.
Sure, no problem.
So,
yep.
Thank you.
Well,
in around November, so I was getting some inquiries about specific expenditures that were allowed under Title I Part A. So I put together a quick reference of those expenditures, and that's what we're transitioning to now. Mark, let me know when you have it.
Yeah, we have it up, Tanisha, and we're looking at probably the first half of it that's got the columns with allowable and unallowable on them.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So the how to use title funds, the document we just reviewed gives you a pretty broad explanation of how you can spend your funds, but there were some LEAs that wanted some more specific items. So it's broken down, as you can see, by categories. So for academic support, some of the things that can be allowable are media center supplies and materials. With these schools being closed, some of these will not be applicable, but as you can see, the third bullet point down, extended learning opportunities, including transportation for extended day and summer programs. So as we transition into 2021 and we are back at a fully functional program, you can provide transportation for summer programs if you want to implement summer programs. Some of the other things that you can do is, of course, resource teachers and classroom teachers. Technology is a huge one right now, especially with the distance learning. The CARES Act has made available a lot of funds that can be used to purchase Chromebooks, online programs. So technology is definitely one of those ones. If you drop down to parent and family engagement, it can fund a parent liaison, community resource person. You can fund childcare for events and trainings, So for those of you who have your parent trainings throughout the year or have parent meetings, your Title I meetings, you can fund teachers or other support staff to be able to provide childcare during those events. You can also fund supplies and materials for those events. Light refreshments for parent trainings. The light refreshments are only allowed for parent training. So if it's an informational meeting, they would not be allowable, but for parent trainings it is. Consultants for parent training events is also allowable. For professional development, it goes into some specific things, instructional coaches, stipends for training attendance, professional development conferences, substitutes for staff to be able to attend PD, as well as supplies and materials. And then when we get into well-rounded education, some of your mentoring programs that you're implementing, SEL, curriculum and resources can be RTI, SBT support. So also one of the monitoring questions is ask what kind of plan do you have in place to address your MTSS and RTI. So this is also one of those areas where if you needed support to support those programs, it can be funded under as a well-rounded education support. Some of the unallowable expenses, of course, core instruction or for core instruction or mandated services, you cannot fund administrators, you can't fund cafeteria staff. For equipment, you cannot fund furniture, fixtures, no capital improvements regarding supplies and materials. You cannot fund student or staff refreshments or snacks, no cafeteria or custodial clinic supplies, ESE forms and tests, or administrative supplies and technology such as grade books or printers. Some of the other things, no field trips for entertainment or recreational purposes, no contributions or donations, no fundraising items, and no motivational speakers. And so if there's something that you want us to consider that is not provided on the list or not similar to what's on the list, you can email me and I'll definitely check into it to see if it's allowable. And so we want to transition Mark to the next one, which is Title I Program Highlight.
Okay.
So again, this form is also housed on the GDOE website as well as the Schoology page. It's a quick guide, quick reference guide. It links you back. A lot of the links you back to several of the resources that are provided on the DDOE website that were also identified in the How to Use Title I funds. We want to drop down to the major challenges and obstacles for 2021 grant process. Again, with the COVID-19 pandemic, it is making it a little difficult to get things done. We understand that, but I definitely want to continue to highlight on parent and family engagement. It is still going to be imperative that we get stakeholder input because Title I, ESSA, and Title I is all about, is heavily involved with parent and stakeholder engagement. And so it's going to be important that we keep that in mind when we develop our parent and family engagement policy, and I'm sure Eric will go more into that. And then even when it comes time to evaluate your school-wide plan and your parent family engagement policy, you have to engage stakeholders and you have to document that the stakeholders have been engaged. So in terms of the comprehensive needs assessment, however you choose to collect that information or collect that input, it could be a virtual meeting like we're doing now, it could be a survey. However you choose to do that, you definitely want to make sure you document your means of collection. And I would also recommend that you hold on to any feedback that you receive from stakeholders. As part, again, as part of your compliance documentation, that is a requirement to show proof that you did engage the stakeholders, and it does also show us what that feedback was from those stakeholders. In terms of your budget, again, I just want to re-emphasize that your school-wide plan in terms of how you budget your funds should have a direct connection to your needs assessment. And then I think that's it. So responses to some of the questions in your consolidated grant application. This will be my first time going through the process. And so John and I will work together throughout this process. So you'll have probably at some point 2 sets of eyes looking at your consolidated grant application. But one of the biggest things that I've noticed so far is the funds transferred to Title I. We have a lot of LEAs that transfer their funds to Title I. And so again, we just want to make sure that whatever we are funding is connected to, it's whatever we're funding is connected, it's identified in your school-wide plan as a Title I expenditure. And so when I go to review your plan, I need to make sure I can identify what Title I will be funding in your plan, as well as see a connection to your comprehensive needs assessment. And so that's all I have for that. So John, if you want to go ahead and pick up next.
Sure. So Mark, if you can take us to the Title I checklist, that would be great. And just so in case anyone is confused, sometimes you see Tanisha's name, sometimes you see both our names for Title I. I am moving into a support and backup position for Tanisha. As you can tell, she's a wealth of Title I information. And as she said, she will be looking at all the applications. So my role will be more for Title I homeless set aside, but I stand ready to support Tanisha anyway that she needs. And if you need some support and for whatever reason, Tanisha's not available, give me a holler. So this is a checklist. I'm going to just briefly go through this because I don't know that we've seen a full one yet. But all of our programs have these, and they're embedded in the e-grant system. But I always found that it was helpful to have these separate, as you're going through a program, have this printed out because these are exactly what it's kind of like a rubric without a scale, if you will. But if you have these, I guess the scale is okay, needs attention and not applicable. I guess that's our scale. But these really are guiding questions and guiding thoughts that each program manager has as they review their particular section. So Mark, if you can just scroll down, you can see that in blue are the main headings for each of the sections in eGrants. I'm not going to read this to you, but like I said, I encourage you to look this over as you're doing the program. If there's anything that you don't understand with these questions, get a hold of the program manager for that section. Some of the things Tanisha talked about already are here, and if you're sure that you do this thoroughly, then there should be less back and forth with asking you to redo some sections. So it goes on and on. Title I is one of our biggest allocations, so we have a lot of things we need to look over. And so there you go. Like I said, if you have any questions on any of the checklists, talk with the program managers. Thanks, Mark. And then we're going to go to allocations.
Sure. You're welcome. Here's allocations.
Okay, and then we have this little help for you too. And if you just kind of scroll down a little bit, Mark, we once again, I'm not going to read it to you, and for the sake of time and everything, but we've talked to you about some of this already, both as a whole group. Mark talked to you about some of this, and then Tanisha talked to you about some others. So this gives you some background information about why we do things, what is allowable, what's not allowable, and how you can, do your per pupil allocations, how to rank and serve, and those features are still in the eGrants application for doing the PPA and equitable services there. So once again, I'm not going to read it all, but there are some interesting information here for your knowledge. Those of you who are brand new to this, please get a hold of us. We're as Mark and Tanisha have said, and I'm sure the rest of our people will say, Bart has also said, we are available. We stand ready to help you. So I know if you're a first-time person, this is going to seem daunting, but we'll get you through. And then I turn it back over to Tanisha.
All right, I'm back again. Okay, so finally for me, we are going to transition into the flexibility for states on K-12 education funding waivers, which is what I'm sure you all have been waiting for. So there has been a FAQs created. This document or this information can also be found on the DDOE website under the COVID-19 link. It's about halfway down. The title of it is actually called K-12 Education Funding Waivers. And so all of those questions that you see listed on the document is housed there as well. So you have two places where you can locate it. So I do want to take a little bit more time with this so that we can make sure we are clear on what the information that I have as up to date as what I have as of today. So the first question, what does the Fiscal K-12 Education Funding Waiver Authority allow? So this is a set of waivers that allows the state to provide approvals for waivers at the district levels. And so it encompasses several of the title programs. All of the waivers are not specific to Title I. So with the first point, the carryover, so if LEAs are approved, this is an approval process, it's not automatic. If LEAs are approved, then one of the things they'll be allowed to do is carry over more than 15% of their Title I Part A funds. This also applies to charters and districts who have received approval that exceeded limitation in the past 3 years. So what that means is if you apply for a waiver to carry over your 15% last school year, you are still eligible even though you've already received one waiver in the last 3-year span. And I hope I'm clear on explaining that. So even if you've received an approval within the last 3 years, you are still eligible to receive another waiver to allow you to carry over 15%. The second thing is the districts would be allowed to extend for itself the waiver will allow the state to extend for itself and its sub-grantees the period of availability of FY19 funds for programs including Title I, Parts A through D, Title II, Part A, Title III, Part A, Title IV, Parts A and B, and Title V, Part B. And McKinney-Vento to allow additional time to obligate those funds. And so that date would be September 30th. So it's basically saying it's granting more time for you to have those FY19 funds available to be able to obligate those funds. Number 3 is going to permit a district or charter or consortium of districts or charters to use its Title IV Part A funds to best meet the needs without regard to content area spending requirements, spending limits on technology infrastructure, or completing a needs assessment. So and I'm sure Eric will go more into details about the Title IV portion of it. Number 4, waive the definition of professional development DDOE and subgrantees would be able to conduct time-sensitive, one-time, or standalone professional development focused on supporting your educators to provide effective distance learning. Again, with this being specific to Title II, I'm going to defer that over to Rashawn to provide more specific details about that. Question 2, what is the process for the district charter to apply to DDOE for one or more of these waivers? Again, this is not automatic. There's an approval process. So district charters will be supplied with a sample template letter that will drop into their letterhead to be signed by the school leader or superintendent. The letter shall be submitted to DDOE for review and approval. An approval letter will be signed by the DDOE representative and returned to the LEA as approval notification. So the link to the application is not linked to this question. So I'm going to recommend that you contact Phil or email Phil for that application and what that's going to look like. Next question, do districts charters have to request a waiver if they don't need one? The answer to that is no. If it is possible to obligate funds on a timely basis or as originally planned, districts and charters do not have to submit a waiver request. Is a budget amendment required? If yes, what is the process? So it's really going to depend. And we are going to follow the current amendment criteria and process that's in place for general amendments. If there is a major programmatic change or the amount of, if the expenditure exceeds the amount threshold, then districts and charters will have to submit an amendment request form. The form process and rules for submitting amendments are located here. So this links you to that information. The amendment criteria and request form is housed on the DDOE website. I struggle sometimes locating it. So if you need some assistance with that, you can email me and I can email that out to you. Do districts charters have to follow federal funding or an expenditure guidelines? Yes. The state has assured the Office of ESEA that its subgrantees will use these funds under the respective programs and in accordance with the provisions of all applicable statutes, regulations, program plans, and applications. So yes, you're still required to follow the ESEA and ESSA guidelines. How can the district charters provide input on these waivers? So you've been provided a link to a survey where you can give input or ask questions through that link. That link is also, if I'm not mistaken, still on the DDOE COVID-19 resource page as well. And then the final question, whom should the district charter staff contact if you have questions? So you've also been provided a link for that as well. That is a general mailbox that comes to title programs. And you've also been provided with a contact number. So any questions or comments specific to the amendments or anything specific to title programs outside of the waiver and outside of questions and comments about the waivers, you would want to send that to the title programs Q&A. If you're asking questions or input specifically to the waivers, I would refer you to the DOE page. And that is all I have for that.
Okay, thank you very much, Tanisha and John. We will now go to chat box questions.
Tanisha, there was one question about school-wide comprehensive needs assessment and school-wide plan. Are they required every year?
Yes, they are. Annually, the LD schools are required to solicit the input of stakeholders to assess the needs of the school to develop a plan and use that to help guide the budgeting for that particular year. Yes, it is required annually.
Great, thanks. And then another question was about CTE and Perkins, and did they kind of fall under this waiver requirement? And the answer to that is no, they don't. They have their own waiver form and process. So if you have a CTE Perkins waiver that you want to send in, you have to contact the CTE people. And that's it for the questions. We can move on.
Okay, thank you, Phil. We're going to move on to Title II, Part A with Rashawn Austin. Rashawn?
Good morning, everyone. Mark, you can go ahead and change the slide. So I'm going to be reviewing the overview for Title II, the purpose of the funding, ways that it can be used. I'm going to provide some examples for the consolidated grant application and provide an opportunity for you to ask questions. There really haven't been many changes in regards to Title II, with the exception of the CARES Act, which allows LEAs to use Title II funding specifically for purposes related to distance learning, professional development, as Tanisha just talked about. So I just want to make people aware of that, that is a allowable use for Title II funding. It has been in the past, but the guidelines around evidence-based learning, you may need to provide educators with one-time training around technology-related issues to provide distance learning. So that is allowable. Mark, you can go ahead and change the slide. Again, please. So again, the purpose of Title II funding is to increase student achievement through improving the quality and effectiveness of teachers, principals, and other school leaders. I do want to emphasize that we really want to pay close attention to number 4 to ensure that Title II funding can be justified for improving the needs of low-income and minority students having access to effective teachers, principals, and school leaders. So how can your Title II funding be used? Teacher and leader evaluation systems. It can be used to support that, create positions to effectively evaluate the implementation of that. It can be used for recruitment, hiring, and retention strategies. Evidence-based professional learning to address the following topics. And we'll talk about this a little further about evidence-based professional learning. Change the slide there. It also can be used for class size reduction, but again, it must be connected to some evidence showing that the student group, the age, and the population benefited from this class size reduction. I know that's a very big one. It can be used to develop policy within your school or your district. You can use it through experiential learning, through observation, and the formulation of partnerships with school-based health programs or organizations. And this might be something that is very necessary based on the current state for specific communities. So please be mindful of that. Now I'm going to move on to the Title II application questions. And I really wanted to go through this because ultimately our goal at DOE is to support you in obtaining your funds efficiently so that there doesn't have to be a lot of back and forth about what is required in the application. And I know sometimes the questions are a lot. So to unpack those questions, I just really wanted to go through specifically what we're looking for. So Title II Part A does not require or should I say, the state has not chosen to have Title II complete a needs assessment. However, we are looking for you to refer back to your needs assessment for Title I or a needs assessment that you are doing at your school or district to guide the professional development. So we should see some alignment there. So if you have not done a needs assessment because perhaps you are not receiving Title I funds, you still need to state what the student need is based upon for this professional learning that you're going to be providing for your teachers. And I would suggest that you at least include a minimum of 5 data sources. Oftentimes people go right to that one summative assessment and they say, okay, this is why we're using this, and that's one data point. But if you could please try to include some other measures, specifically qualitative data, if you've done some surveys with teachers around need or even students, that's helpful. Please describe what you're going to be doing or how this activity or professional learning addresses that need, and what strategy that you're using to target that need. So are you going to be using job embedded professional development? Are you going to be conducting professional learning communities? These are high leveraged evidence-based strategies. A lot of times people in these applications start just listing just activities that they're going to be doing within their LEA. And what we're really looking for is those high leverage evidence research-based strategies there. And for you to cite at least one that has found or proven using this strategy to be effective. So that's really where I see the applications sent back, because people haven't really fleshed that out. So I'm encouraging you to really, if you can, follow this structure when you're answering this question. And then number 5, the last piece that we're looking for is that there is some alignment with what you have outlined here in question 1 and the actual budget expenditures. Oftentimes people have a lot of really great things that they have talked about that they're doing, but then I go to the budget and there's a mismatch, or there's something different that they're spending their funds on in the budget. So whatever it is that you want to spend your funds on, it needs to be outlined here in question number 1. Okay, Mark, you can change. The second piece I really wanted to hone in on is, according to federal law, you have to use evidence-based strategy. So a lot of you are, but you are not naming them specifically. Like you may be doing ongoing professional learning communities to improve professional practice around a specific topic. Just say that. Many of you are using observation feedback. So you want to name those high leverage strategies there, and then cite some evidence of where that has been shown to work. Okay. Question 2 is also one that gets a lot of people's applications kicked back to them. And that's simply around people stating that, well, I'm a single school LEA, or everyone in my is high needs or low income. And that may be very well the case, but the federal law requires you to still outline how those funds are targeting the neediest group, even within a high needs group. So, I'll say maybe LEA is struggling with some disproportionality around suspensions for special education students. That needs to be outlined, and you need to show how what you're using this professional learning funding, how that connects to that. So everyone does have to answer this question, irregardless of whether they're a single school or everyone in their school is low income or high needs or minority population. You can move on to the next slide. This is often the third question where we find LEA struggle with their application process. And this is because they have not included at least 2 or 3 data sources in question number 1. So when you begin to think about how you are evaluating the effectiveness of what you're doing, going back to those data sources in question 1 is really going to help you to know whether it's actually working or not. So again, if you've invested in, let's say, instructional coaches for your school district or your school, you want to be gathering, observation feedback data that they are providing for, let's say, novice teachers, if that's what you've chosen to use your funds on, to see whether novice teachers are improving in specific areas of the observation. So really be thinking about that, because when LEAs are monitored, this is frequently where people don't have a lot of data. So just making sure that when you answer question 1 and you list what data sources you use to determine the need for professional development, you're going back and collecting that ongoing data on those data markers. Okay, we can move to question, the next slide. And again, I'm sorry, Mark.
That's okay. I'll go back. No problem. Okay, Rashawn.
So I frequently come back to Guskey's evaluation model, because when you are collecting evidence around the effectiveness of the professional learning, frequently people are collecting evaluation data on level 1, participant reaction. Did they like it? Did they enjoy it? Or even level 2, perhaps, if they can regurgitate what they've learned, where the federal government is really requiring us to be beyond sort of level 2 with evaluating the impact of professional development and looking at, has this learning or is this learning supporting organizational change? Are your participants or teachers or whomever was receiving this learning or this benefit, are they implementing that knowledge? So again, if you go back to the instructional coach model, are teachers improving? Are they changing their practice as a result of participating in these professional learning communities? Meeting with instructional coaches, receiving observation feedback. And then obviously the final outcome, which is level 5, you want to be collecting what was the impact on student achievement as a result of this. Okay. Question 4 basically requires the LEA to describe how everyone has had an equal opportunity to participate in professional learning, and if you foresee barriers to that access or participation. And so this might be particularly relevant now, in that a lot of an opportunity has to be done virtually. And so you want to be thinking about, how people may or may not have access to what's being offered based on a specific circumstance, and how you as an LEA are taking steps to address that. So that is all for me. I am available to answer any questions. There is specific guidance on the website. I can send that to you if you have additional questions, but if not, that's all.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Rashawn. That takes us to our chat box question segment.
No questions in the chat box for Title II. We can move on.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Phil. Next, we have Title III, and we have Maria Paxson.
Hello, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well and moving along. I was able to speak with a lot of the Title III folks last week, and I am impressed with a lot of the things that I hear going on out in the districts and charters. So I'm here to talk to you today about the Title III portion of the grant. not a lot has changed, if anything. I just wanted to highlight a few things because I did make some updates in our guidance documents. So I want to, one, encourage you to take a look, but I pulled out in this section a lot of those pieces where I just want to focus your attention, or there's been a slight change made. Again, nothing has actually changed programmatically. The same 5 questions are there in the Title III section, and just the one question if you are lucky enough to receive the large amount of immigrant funds that a few of you get. So those same questions are there, but I just wanted to draw your attention quickly to the piece about funding requirements. So these are the 3 things that Title III requires that funds are spent on. These are the must-dos, and then there are a lot of mays. So you must, your funds must be used to increase English language proficiency of your English learners by providing effective language instructional educational programs. And those programs have to do 2 things. They need to increase the English language proficiency of your students and also their academic achievement. So looking at content and language in tandem. Your funds need to be used to provide effective professional development to classroom teachers. This is not just your EL teachers, but rather all educators. So your classroom teachers, your principals, administrators, all of which should really be considered, again, thinking about how we advance English language proficiency and student academic achievement. I know this has been an area of focus for us throughout this year, and thinking about how we all work together to improve outcomes for our English learners rather than just one isolated group. So consider that as you build out your grant. You also must provide, use those funds to provide and implement any other effective activities that enhance your program. So this is a supplemental grant, as all of you know, meaning that you have a program already, and then this needs to be ways that you enhance it. So this can include parent-family engagement activities and other ways that you coordinate or align related programs. So as you think about using your funds, think about how you can help build on maybe an extra layer using these funds to some other programs that you already have in place, specifically to support your English learners. That link on the bottom will just take you to the actual form that has this spelled out for you with a lot more information. Mark, if you can go to the next slide.
Yep, Marina, you don't want me to bring up the form? We're good with just points, right?
Yeah, I think we're just good with this.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you.
No problem.
So those are the 3 things that the law says we must do with these funds. This is not a comprehensive list of the may use, but I'm pulling some of these out. Just, I know sometimes we are buying materials repeatedly, or we are just using it for sending folks to conferences. I just want to kind of draw your attention to some other may use areas as we report this out annually to the federal government and how these funds are being used. These are some areas that kind of jumped out to me, and I wanted to make sure that I was drawing your attention to. So I'm not going to run through everything that's there, but these funds can be used for multiple different things as well beyond. Again, they need to be specifically to support your English learners. So make sure as you're thinking about this, you're calling that out in your responses. How does this actually help your English learners? It can impact other students as well. We never deter you from using your funds in a way that will help beyond English learners, but you need to be explicit about how this is truly supporting your English learners. Community participation, one piece particularly relevant right now for you to think about is this improving instruction with technology, instructional materials, electronic networks. I know that has come out quite a bit in this crisis that we're currently in. So considering this is a really good time for us to start thinking in new ways about these funds and how we might be able to use them to truly, truly make sure that we're filling in that gap for our English learners. So go ahead to the next one, Mark. The program highlights document, just a couple of key points that are on that form. Again, that link will bring you directly to that form. But make sure that you're thinking about how all of your expenditures are aligned to support increased outcomes for English learners. Sometimes grants are just going back because it sounds like it's just a global thing and the connection isn't made. Well, I know many of you and I know a lot of the programs that are going on, it's just important that we have it clearly stated within the grant how the particular expenditure or your particular response is supporting outcomes for English learners. The other piece just to be careful about there is that you should make sure that if you're buying something for the masses, so one example of this might be you decide that school-wide you're going to buy Chromebooks, and then you say, well, let's see, we can buy these Chromebooks for our English learners using Title III funds, that you've bought this for everybody. You can't do that. So you need to be thinking very carefully about how you are using these funds, making sure that you're not explicitly saying, well, we're buying a book for everybody, but we'll buy the books for the English learners using Title III funds. It needs to be something above and beyond. So just being careful about that. Sometimes we see that in the grant. Go ahead to the next one, Mark. And this is this small immigrant increase piece, the piece that I always like to remind people here. So you'll have your Title III funds, and then some folks will also receive immigrant increase funds. This is usually a very small amount of money, but it does need to be exclusively used for your immigrant students. That list can be found in our English Learner database. So you can see who those students are, where they are. The funds, when you answer the question, please tie back explicitly how this is working to support your immigrant funds. It can't just be used in the same way as the rest of your Title III funds. So that's the biggie. The other piece that I like to remind people is, despite the fact that this is a very small pot of money, it is subject to equitable share. So you do need to complete that piece that Mark was talking to us about earlier for your Title III immigrant increase funds. I think that's all. This is my contact information. Happy if you're new to doing Title III, more than willing to hop on a call with you and walk you through it, make sure that you're in the right direction, talk to you before you submit. Please feel free to reach out. Happy to help.
Okay, thanks so much, Maria. That takes us to our Title III chat box question session.
Yeah, there were no Title III specific questions in the chat box. We can move ahead.
Hey, thank you, Phil. We are now on to Title IV, Part A with Eric Stansel. Eric?
Good morning, everyone. I hope all is well with you and your families. Most of the information that I'm going to share with you today should be a review, as there is not many significant changes for Title IV, Part A. Next slide, Mark. As you know, the purpose of these funds is to assist with preparing our students to graduate college and career ready. The three main categories for the use of the funds are well-rounded educational opportunities, improved school conditions for student learning, and the effective use of technology. Next slide. For the LEAs that receive at least $30,000 in funds, as you know, a comprehensive needs assessment must be completed every 3 years. In regards to the spending rules, at least 20% of your funds should be allocated for well-rounded educational opportunities, at least 20% for safe and healthy student initiatives, and with the remaining funds, effective use of technology, with the understanding that there is a 15% cap for software and hardware purchases. As Tanisha stated earlier, you can have these requirements waived for your 2019 funds. Next slide. As in other title programs, you must provide equitable services. and you cannot reserve more than 2% for your direct administrative costs. Next slide, Mark. Now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the needs assessment. As you know, we do provide a user-friendly template in which we believe will naturally support your strategic planning. It's going to allow you to be able to disaggregate your data, identify your top priorities for the 3 categories, and then develop your action steps so you can spend your money wisely and effectively. It's not mandatory that you use our template. However, whatever you do provide, we ask that it provides similar information. Another tool that we provide is the spending rules worksheet. It's going to allow you to be able to clearly chart the items that you intend to purchase for each category, along with the price. And it is formatted so you can have clear evidence to be able to identify whether your plan and your costs meet the spending rules criteria. Both the needs assessment and the spending rules worksheet templates can be found within eGrants. We'll also make sure it's on our Title IV Part A website, and as well as part of our all title program Schoology page. One of the things that we do want to highlight for the upcoming fiscal year is leveraging your Title I Part A funds. Currently, about 40% of the LEAs transfer their funds to other eligible programs such as Title I Part A. And we want to encourage you to keep your Title IV funds and simply leverage with other programs to maximize your effectiveness. So for example, say an LEA receive $50,000 in Title IV Part A funding, and they decided to spend $25,000 to improve STEM instruction, $15,000 for trauma-informed training for staff, and then $8,500 for STEM PD, and then $1,500 for STEM software and hardware purchases. In order to expand and maximize these initiatives, you can simply leverage your Title I Part A funds. It's going to allow you to be able to purchase additional supplies, equipment, whatever it is, to be able to maximize these initiatives. Next slide. So for those who do decide to transfer Title IV Part A funds, you can transfer your money into these eligible title programs. Keep in mind that once funds are transferred, they cannot be moved back. And the next slide just provides a brief snapshot of how Title IV money has been spent for fiscal year 2020. All right. So if there's any question, if you ever needed any support as far as understanding how to use your money or leverage your money, feel free to contact me anytime with any questions.
Okay, thanks so much, Eric. We're now in our segment for chatbot questions for Title IV.
There were no Title IV specific chatbot questions. We can move on.
Okay, thank you, Phil. We move on to IDEA Part B, Sections 611 and 619. We have Marianne, Susan, and Cindy.
Okay, this is Marianne Michkowski. I'm the Director of Exceptional Children Resources, and I welcome you today. I hope everyone's well. Go ahead, Mark. Okay, we're going to talk about IDEA Part B. You know, it's a federal law, and that it helps to pay the excess cost of providing a free, appropriate public education to children with disabilities. And it comes in 2 grant awards. Section 611 funds are for students 3 to 21 who've been identified as children with disabilities, according to the requirements of IDEA. We call that Big B. And then Section 619, which we lovingly refer to as Little B, funds supports for students ages 3 to 5 who have been identified. Okay? Whoops.
Sorry, we skipped a slide. I'll go back.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So 611 funds, the uses of funds, an LEA that meets maintenance of effort and excess cost requirements, which you have to do earlier in the year. And Kathy Wolf in our finance department helps calculate the maintenance of effort and excess costs, and then sends an official letter out saying whether you've met maintenance of effort and excess cost or whether you have not. So 611 funds are spent on reasonable costs to deliver special education and related services. And some common costs include special education teachers and administrators' salaries, related service providers, whether employed in the LEA or contracted. Next. Materials and supplies to use with children with disabilities, professional development for special education personnel, professional development for regular education teachers who teach children with disabilities, and assistive technology services to assist children with disabilities. And you'll see that set, all those responsibilities are directly related to children with disabilities. It also can support quality supports for teachers who work with students with disabilities, increasing the use of technology to help students with disabilities access the general education curriculum, provide special education related services to all students as part of a multi-tiered system of support, providing instructional supports to students with disability, behavioral supports for students with disability, transition services for those identified students, implement progress monitoring tools, web-based IEPs, and other data collection systems. Okay? So here's a scenario. This would be surrounding literacy interventions for students with disabilities. So an elementary school has 5 special education students needing specialized reading instruction, such as, say, decoding skills, and it's consistent with the goals on their IEP. The LEA can use 611 funds for that special education teacher. Next. So professional development for the special education teacher, those funds could be used for instructional materials surrounding that. And these are some examples of how you can spend money, 611 funds, to address the needs of those students. Next.
Okay, so we'll
here we go.
Yeah, here we go. Thanks, Marion. So this is Cindy, and I hope everyone's not struggling too badly with quarantine fatigue at this point. We'll talk just a minute about Section 619. It's really identical to the Big B that Marianne talked about. This is kind of an add-on or a carve-out with supplemental or additional funds provided through the grant for students 3 through 5. That means until their 6th birthday. So LEAs can, and they do, use their 619 funds to support kindergarten student needs as well prior to their turning 6. And here's the list of some common costs I'm not going to go through the whole list. Some that are really common that I often see are the salaries and OECs, and then oftentimes contracted services for your OTs, PTs, speech, that sort of thing, and then also materials and supplies. Sometimes I'm seeing a little bit of an increase in assistive technology, districts purchasing iPads and apps, especially for the kiddos on the autism spectrum. Go ahead, Mark. So here's scenario number 2, and this is about promoting the social emotional learning of these young children. And LEA recognizes that its preschool students with disabilities are facing some challenges in communicating with their teachers and peers, following instructions, and using their appropriate behaviors to achieve their goals. So you can, and districts have been using their 619 funds to support high quality professional development for its personnel needed to promote those skills. A common one that we're seeing on the rise in Delaware is the use of conscious discipline, and that also is helping to prevent and address challenging behaviors. Go ahead. And some other things, implementing an evidence-based model for promoting social emotional development. Some districts have been, and you certainly may, purchase curriculums and the professional development that goes along with implementing that curriculum with fidelity on social emotional development. Some districts are doing parent outreach as an improved or increased child find activity. And then also, again, developing support for improving behavioral outcomes. Go ahead.
All right. Well, we're here at the point. This is Susan Vienema, and I am our equity liaison in the special ed exceptional children's work group. I'm here to talk about significant disproportionality. How the process has run has not changed, but what we're calling it is a little different. The federal government changed it to Comprehensive Coordinated Early Intervening Services, so you call it CCEIS, and that's if you are identified in your district for significant disproportionality. That can be the area of discipline, identification, and placement. Those are the 3 areas that you looked at, and there's 96 or 98 ways that that can be identified. If you are identified, you need to set aside 15% of the total IDEA 619 and 611 funds allowable for children that were for that section that you were identified for that. There's another way that you can set aside funds to ensure that that's not happening, and that's through voluntary coordinated early intervening services. And that's what we called the whole gamut before, but now the voluntary portion is just called CEIS. So you'll hear us refer to CCEIS and CEIS. One's voluntary and one you are mandated to do by the federal government and IDEA, and that's also in our Delaware Code. Next slide. I think I'm frozen.
Do you want me to pick up, Susan?
Please, yes. I can't, it's frozen.
So the LEAs with significant disproportionality must reserve these funds. Again, she said, Susan said it's comprehensive, coordinated early intervening services, and they have to address the factors, the policies, practices, and procedures that contribute to that significant disproportionality area that you are found. And these can be professional development, educational behavioral evaluation services and supports. Next slide. So voluntary can include professional development again, enable them to deliver scientifically based academic and behavioral interventions, and also providing educational and behavioral evaluation services and supports. So both the comprehensive and the voluntary CEIS can be used for those areas. Next. But one of the most important things, we must report to DDOE. The LEAs have to report to us, and then we have to report to the feds the number of children who are receiving those services, both voluntary and the comprehensive. It's the number of children who subsequently receive special education and related services during the preceding 2 years. So we need to know the number of kids that are receiving the services, and then the number of kids who subsequently were identified under special education. So remember, if you voluntarily reserve up to 15%, or you must reserve 15%, we have to have those numbers. Next. With this slide presentation and with your material, we have documents that explain this. Some really quick reads and things you might want to post up on your bulletin board when you're doing the consolidated grant, so you know what this is about. Next. Okay, we have supplement, not supplant requirements, but they're tested differently in IDEA than the other federal programs. Next. Typically, you have 3 presumptions when you use federal funds: activities required by law, activities supported with state or local funds last year, and in the case of Title I or the Migrant Education Program, activities for eligible students when activities are provided to other students with state and local funds. Next. However, they don't apply to IDEA. Instead, LEAs have to comply with maintenance of effort requirements, and those maintenance of effort requirements meet the supplement, not supplant requirement. So when you go through the activities of the maintenance of effort and the excess cost, we will figure out whether you meet the supplement, not supplant requirements. Next. So when you're completing the consolidated grant, you have to submit a plan of assurances verifying that the LEAs will comply with certain IDEA requirements. You're providing faith, that your resources are accessible to all children. So there are a number of assurances that you have to verify that your LEA is doing. And then budgets, you must budget at least as much non-federal money this year as the LEA spent last year. The non-federal money means local funds, a combination of state or local funds, and is measured either on a per student basis or in total. This is part of your maintenance of effort requirement. Next. So each of the grants under IDEA, big B and little b, is allocated to students through a formula. These formulas have 3 parts: a base payment, a population payment, and a poverty payment. That's all calculated by Kathy Wolf up in our finance office using this formula. This formula has been approved by federal DOE. Mark's going back. We have a few checklists. Next, Mark. A few checklists, a 619 checklist, and then next, a 611 checklist. These are the lists, and we're providing them to you. These are the lists that we use when we go through the consolidated grant. So you have them when you're developing your grant. We have them when we're approving the grant. Next. We have additional resources to provide to you, how IDEA Part funds can be used, Part B funds can be used, and there's the link. Next.
Did you want me to bring that up, or we'll just leave it as a resource in the link?
Oh, just a resource in the link.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, the CEIS and the CCEIS comparison chart. that I referenced prior to this, something that is very easily accessible in understanding the two requirements. Next. And then you always call me up. You can call Cindy up for the 619 funds, or you can reach out to your ECR, Exceptional Children Resource Liaison. Every LEA has a liaison within my work group. They're the ones who absolutely approve your grants, so you can always call them up and talk with them while you're developing the grant.
Marianne, can I jump in one last time?
Absolutely.
So as John said earlier, and actually Mark shared the budget requirement form, and then John talked about the checklist, our recommendation would be that you have those printed out and right there with you as you're preparing your budgets. Just double checking yourself to make sure that you're meeting the definitions and the elements that are on that budget requirement form. And then also looking at the checklist. As Marianne said, this is what we're looking at. It's that kind of rubric that we're kind of, thumbs up, thumbs down. And just some simple things like not saying this is to benefit students with disabilities makes us, return it to you. So really be thoughtful about, your narrative description. If it was somebody from the Office of Special Education Programs looking at this, would it be clear to them that this is a sufficient description and that it's an allowable use of the funds? Not using things like abbreviations. Just be very clear and specific and make sure that what you're putting in there, lines up with the budget requirement form and the checklist.
Very good point, Cindy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Marianne, Cindy, and Susan. We're going to go on to our chat box question segment.
There was one question about whether IDEA funds could be transferred into other federal programs and vice versa. And I already answered the question as the answer is no. Mitch, if you want to confirm my answer, the answer is no.
That's correct. You can transfer the funds, however, you could braid the.
That's correct.
Right.
Leverage all your funds and spend it on similar initiatives. You certainly can.
Yeah, and if I can just jump. Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Phil. This is Mark again. If I could just jump in that from the eGrants technical side, when you go into allocations, the system, because remember when we talked about transferability earlier and we did the demonstration, we were in allocations, the system's not going to allow you to transfer from one program to another that doesn't allow transfers. You're only going to see boxes available where you can transfer from and to. So that's another piece that can be of assistance as well.
That's a good safety check.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Good fail safe.
Good question.
The other question that showed up in the chat box was, would the different title checklists and guidelines be available in Schoology? And the answer is yes. We will have them available in Schoology, on the eGrants web, in the eGrants system, on our website, and available to anybody who just emails us. We'll be glad to email them back to you.
Okay, having no other questions for that section, we're going to go ahead and move on. And we did a little analysis of application development for the last fiscal year. And again, I'm not gonna read this word for word. If you want to kind of take a look at it, you're welcome to. Our time is probably better spent focusing on some best practices that you're going to want to focus as you put the next fiscal year's application together. We have some tips that we would like to go ahead and share. The first is be sure to include a broad range of stakeholders, right? You want to include parents, teachers, school leaders, students, stakeholders within your school community, and representatives from the larger community. And when we did our analysis, I'm just going to flip back for a minute. The The LEAs that had great examples of either stakeholder engagement and or the activities were the ones that had really diverse groups of people as part of those stakeholder groups, and the ones that had very diverse activities. So you wouldn't want to have, just say administrators discussing this at a board meeting, because that's one stakeholder group and one activity. You're looking for, as I said earlier, a broad range of stakeholders to start off, right? We reviewed those. And you also want diverse activities. So it could be planning meetings are fine. That's probably the most common, but things like needs assessments, casting the net out to try to figure out, okay, what does our individual LEA, what does our individual charter school, what are our strengths, where are our needs? It could involve engaging the community, it should involve engaging the community through presentations, through meetings. They could be board presentations. You may wish to cast the net out again and even break it down into focus groups in order to kind of take the temperature within your own school and district community. You may wish to do surveys. You may wish to engage with the broad range of stakeholders in some goal setting, and you may wish also to engage in some articulation sessions. This would be valuable, especially in larger districts that have lots of schools. The needs from one school to another may be a little bit different, and so cracking the code to figure out, what's going to be best for the district as a whole or for the school as a whole. Those articulation sessions can be helpful there. So again, these are some best practices. If you have questions on those or you're looking for ideas on the application development piece, please just let us know. But again, if you have diverse stakeholders, diverse activities, you should be good. And I will say too that this is not something that the LEAs and charter schools are rated or graded on or anything like that. This is just an internal data analysis that we do to present to you, how the LEAs and charter schools did in terms of the application development for the last grant cycle. And again, most importantly, just like data-driven instruction, to share with you what some of the best practices would be moving forward as you develop your applications for the next grant cycle. So that's application development. Are there any questions, ideas, comments on application development? Okay, and nothing entered into the chat box, Phil?
No.
Okay, wonderful. Seeing and hearing none, we're going to go ahead and we're going to end the session with any questions about anything that people might have. But before we do that, because we know that if you don't have questions, you may wish to leave, although we encourage everyone to stay for the last question portion. But we want to thank you for your participation. We had about 115 people on here for quite a while. We've still got just about 100. We know that this has been a challenging time for everyone with what's going on with COVID and remote learning and all that stuff. And we just really appreciate your dedication. And we don't want the CGA process this year in any way to add to what's already been a bit of a stressful time for everyone. So please do continue to reach out to us. We will get back to you very quickly. We have that how can we help you mentality, and we are definitely devoted and dedicated to that. So thank you once again. When you have a chance over the next couple days, if you could fill out this form, which is a survey, to let us know how we did and how we can improve, we would greatly appreciate that. And with that said, that concludes the formal portion of our presentation, and we will now go to any general questions or specific.
Muted. Unmuted.
The chat box function, and we're going to have Phil facilitate for us.
I did open up the microphones to everyone too. If you unmute yourself, you can ask a question that way, or you can ask it in the chat box.
Mark, can you hear me?
Yes, Tanisha.
Okay, I just wanted to add, for the Title I Part A, as part of the allocations for the LEAs that receive more than $500,000, of course, you know you're required to set aside for parent engagement. For the LEAs that receive less than $500,000, there's not a reservation or a requirement for set aside, but the expectation is to still have or fund some or address the need for parent involvement. And so I just wanted to add that resources, the allowable and unallowable, if you are one of those schools, charter LEAs or LEAs that even though you have less than $500,000 and not required to set aside, if you wanted some ideas of things you can still fund for your parent engagement, that is a good resource to use. Also, if there's something that is specific to your school or to your LEA that you have questions about, please let me know so we can work through that as well.
Thanks, Tanisha.
Mark,
Okay.
I have one question. This is Debbie Rodenhauser. I have a question about the Title IV template for the needs assessment. Can we use that template for our annual school-wide needs assessment?
You referring to the template that's uploaded in eGrants already?
Yes.
Phil, you want to take that one?
So, yeah, Debbie, the Title IV needs assessment is Title IV specific. What we have done is we have taken the regular needs assessment template, which is located on the DOE website, and we have altered it down and cut it down. The regular needs assessment has several sections. The Title IV needs assessment only covers Title IV and only has 3 sections, one for well-rounded, one for safe and healthy schools, and one for effective use of technology. So those 3 pages are the only parts of the Title IV needs assessment, and the school-wide needs assessment needs to encompass all the parts. So if you're looking for a needs assessment template, I can't remember off the top of my head where it is located on the DOE website, but there is a general needs assessment template located on the DOE website that you can use for your school-wide needs assessment. You cannot use the Title IV one and count it as your school-wide one.
Okay, so then just to clarify, so for the Title IV, we need to do that one every 3 years, which is separate from the other one that is the general school-wide.
Yeah, and the reason we did that was because we wanted to make it quick and easy for people to get one done, so that they didn't have to do the whole comprehensive needs assessment. They could just do the Title IV part and meet that requirement.
Okay, thanks, Phil and Mark. And if I have any other questions, I'll just email you.
Thanks, Debbie.
Excuse me, can I also add, there is a school-wide plan blank template for the needs assessment and school-wide plan on the Schoology page. So if there's some resources there that would also help for that.
Thanks, Tanisha, that's helpful.
You're welcome.
So this is Renee Jones from Indian River School District. I had a phone call come in just as you were talking about the waivers. Are those applications linked somewhere? Will they be sent to us? And what is the deadline for completion?
The deadline is 1 year, and they will be sent out later this week. The template that was designed was just approved yesterday. So there'll be a communication coming out shortly, either later this afternoon or tomorrow, regarding the template and the waivers. There'll be directions. It's very similar to the previous Title I 15% carryover waiver. If you've ever seen that template, it's a Word document that you're going to drop into your own district or charter school letterhead, signed by your charter school leader or superintendent, and you send it back to us. It's a checkoff type waiver. The waivers are listed in box format. You just simply check the boxes of the waivers that you would like to apply for, send it back, sign it, and send it back, and we'll send you a confirmation letter telling you that those waivers have been approved.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
I don't see any more questions in the chat box, and I'm not hearing any more questions. Are we good to end the meeting then, Mark?
Yeah, I don't have anything else from the general end. Program managers, does anyone want to add anything else? Yeah, I'm not hearing anything, Phil. I think we're probably good to go.
Okay, great job. Thank you, everybody, for participating. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us. We'll be more than happy to answer them.
Okay, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.